Yeah, welcome everybody. We're really glad you could join us, and happy Thanksgiving. Although I think the people who are celebrating are not on this call today. We have a few less people this afternoon than we did this morning. Good morning to those in Mexico. Good evening to those in Indonesia and everyone in between. My name is Karen. I'm the program coordinator for CBI. I will lead today's webinar with my colleague Tina, and we're very excited to introduce our new partners from the SDG AI Lab in this webinar, Gökhan, Jonas, and Martin. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for joining forces with us to advance disaster management through new technologies. So today's webinar, what you can expect from it is that you'll become familiar with our collaboration with the SDG AI Lab. You'll also learn about the key objectives of the planned work, the desired outcomes, the structure, the next steps. And we aim to go through some basics of key technologies that can be applied in their potential use within the CBI context. You can also share needs, use cases, and experiences with us to establish common ground for the research. That'll be extremely helpful. And finally, you can express your interest in engaging with CBI in this work stream and how we can best support you. So today we have a lot of content, and we look forward to learning a lot and continuing in future webinars and bilateral discussions. This is just the beginning. So there'll be many opportunities for further discussions as the project evolves. We've got a smaller group today, so I hope we have some good discussions. After this, Gökhan, Tina, and Jonas and Martin will present the planned work and conduct a short Mentimeter exercise to hear your views. We will then have short presentations from two networks from Mexico and Turkey. And then we'll open up the floor to other networks and all participants for comments and questions. You can also use the chat function to ask questions as we go through the presentations. Then we'll do the debrief. We'll just do a brief closing with next steps. With this, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And without further ado, hand over to Tina. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you, Karen. And Jonas, if you can skip to the next slide. So I'm just going to provide a very brief introduction. So today's webinar falls under the CBI's work on innovation. And of course, we acknowledge that innovation is a very broad concept, and new technologies are only enabling some of the innovation, and it can also relate to processes and all kinds of other things that do not have anything to do with technology. But with fast development, we see that new technologies can play a very important role in disaster management innovation. And today we are focusing especially on the potential of new technologies, as we have this new and very concrete opportunity to take our work forward thanks to our partnership with the SDG AI Lab colleagues. And regarding the background of this work area at CBI, when we got started in 2016, 17, 18, we realized that there was a lot of innovation happening in the CBI member networks and a lot of partnerships to take on new technologies. For example, in Sri Lanka, they teamed up with the local taxi hailing app PickMe and tailored the taxi hailing service for flood rescue using location data. In the Philippines, the network was organizing startup competitions with UNDP to develop solutions for disaster management. And we also noticed that many of the networks were using communication technologies for early warning systems, for conducting rapid needs assessments after disaster, and so on. So as we were a much smaller team back then, we focused on collecting and sharing some of these examples from the networks. But we always knew that we need to do more in this area, and that there was so much potential. So last year also, the Boston Consulting Group conducted our strategy refresh process, and they did a lot of interviews with the different networks and partners, and they found that CBI networks innovate organically and out of necessity to improve their operations and effectiveness. And some innovate on quite simple and practical models, and some on very disruptive models. And what BCG suggested was that CBI can support and elevate these network level innovations through a coordinated approach that uses broad range of global and local sources and fosters this inter-network sharing and encouraging this testing and learning culture. So this year we wanted to take these recommendations forward, and we teamed up with the SDG AI Lab on the use of new technologies for disaster management. And you will hear about this plan with them shortly, and we very much look forward to your inputs also, how we can make this work very useful for your daily lives and daily work. So before this, let me also mention that we do acknowledge that a lot of the in a lot of the disaster management space, it may be the government or it might be another partner who leads on the efforts, also including the new technologies. But we want to take this quite comprehensive approach in looking at the potential of new technologies, so that we can also then identify the different entry points private sector networks and private sector can play in this, in helping the countries develop their systems. So without further ado, I'm very much looking forward to this exchange and this interactive session, and brainstorming with you all how we can make this work best benefit the overall objectives that we have for our work. Thank you so much. Over to Gökhan.
Thank you so much, Tina. I would like to welcome you all. And I will try to briefly explain the SDG Lab background and how it is relevant to this partnership with CBI and how it can contribute to CBI networks in with its experience and with its activities. It is a UNDP initiative, a joint initiative of 3 different UNDP departments, and it is hosted under IICPST, Istanbul International Center for Private Sector in Development. The main objectives of this SDG Lab is putting in use these technologies in sustainable development context, and at the same time strengthening UNDP's and its stakeholders' capacity for the increasing demand for AI-like technology solutions. And we are working in 3 areas, and these are very common in other laboratories also: development, research, and advisory. And we will be conducting together with CBI a research about these technologies, on the potential of different technologies and their implementation. We will have 2 development streams under this partnership where we will be exploring AI and GIS. So we will be also together working on development activities. And we are providing advisory, basically support to UNDP units with our in-house expertise, and also facilitate partnerships with the private sector. We will be happy to contribute to networks also in these fields. And I will just give a glimpse of what we are doing with the other teams. And we will be bringing all these technologies and experience and expertise from the other projects to the CBI networks. We are working on a large set of project documents, and we are using this information extraction and similar technologies, and we can do also similar activities with CBI networks. We are working on GIS data for identifying coral reef health, and we will be also extensively using GIS in the CBI context. And also we are modeling risk or identifying the sentiments in the social media, and you will see that there are also potential areas to implement these technologies in disaster resilience and response context. So I'm giving floor back to my colleagues to present the details of the research and some ideas about future collaboration. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Gökhan, and thank you, Karen and Tina, for your introductions. So again, I'm Jonas, and I work for the SDG Lab at UNDP, and I'm a data scientist, mostly working on text data and machine learning right now. And I am really excited to meet all of you and to share a bit more details about our ongoing research and development with CBI on this. So before we dive into the details, I would just quickly remind you and try to give more emphasis why it's important to meet you today. So just to start with some statistics and facts again, between 2010 and 2017 alone, we recorded 354 disasters, 68,000 deaths, over 210 million people affected, and at least 153 billion US dollars in damages. And just in 2017, 122 countries were affected by disasters. So this is one side, and in the meanwhile, on the other side, and that's the side where we're coming from, we are at a breakpoint of digital advancement. 90% of the worldwide data was just created in the last 5 years. And there are already 40 times more bytes of data than stars in the observable universe. So it's just crazy numbers, and it's a really interesting, exciting time to work on this. And also technology just becomes more accessible. more and more. And in the light of those enormous increases, algorithms advance already to have nearly ubiquitous impact on society. So our job is to make use of the new and existing technologies and to support disaster preparedness, response, and recovery, and to do this together with the networks. And one thing we need to understand, and one question we need to answer to do this, is what technologies we want to cover in this research. And we were thinking about this list internally a little bit, and those are the technologies that just came back to us repeatedly. And I just want to very quickly introduce and define some of these technologies to you, so we just have a common understanding what we are talking about. So for example, 3D printing. It basically defines the process of making a physical object from a three-dimensional digital model. And it's already used, for example, to print medical devices, and it's scaled to print whole infrastructures like houses. Then, of course, we have AI, which is probably one of the key technologies we're going to look at and we're going to talk about. And for me, this encompasses machine learning, computer vision, and NLP. So I would define AI as the process to program computers to mimic human behavior and to learn from past experiences. And I guess speaking of learning from past experiences, I will try to maybe just cover the key technologies here because we're running low on time this morning already. So maybe something else to mention is cloud computing for me. Cloud computing really brought the whole field forward because it allows us to access physical goods without owning them. We can access computing power, storage, and servers just over the internet. Then something else like crowdsourcing is really interesting, engaging many people on a common goal and basically advancing technology as well. Then cyber-physical systems, that's kind of the end goal, what we want to have. It's basically like a computer system in which all the mechanisms are controlled by an algorithm and not by humans anymore. Examples could be like autonomous vehicles or smart grids here, I think. Then talking about drones, of course, and I think here we're mostly going to focus on the aerial vehicles because I think underwater vehicles are mostly used for remote sensing. And like we can use them just to bring goods from A to B, which is already very useful, but also to take images for damage assessment, for example. Then of course, GIS, which is the key technology in DRM, I would say. And luckily we have Martin on the call, so he will give you more information about that. And maybe something else, Internet of Things is also very interesting, I think, because you can think of this, that this is basically trying to combine many data sources and make them accessible in real time. So I can also give you more examples about that. Then of course, remote sensing, for example, using drones to measure seismic or hydrological activities. And then social media, which is more my field again, like everything written in text and also images on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all the online forums. So to add a little bit more context to that, I also quickly want to cover what those technologies are used for and what we're aiming to do a little bit. So for example, looking at hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons, key technologies here are GIS, AI, drones, social to assess damages after a disaster happened. Then moving more into the preparedness section, and we can talk about disaster prediction, for example, for floods. People are using many data sources to predict the probability that a flood will happen or not. And positive examples are already implemented in India, Iran, and Myanmar, for example. Then something else, disaster preparedness and situation awareness. And that's something that IoT is very useful for, to combine data sources and to probably push them in the dashboard and make them accessible in real time. Then talking about conflict and fragility. That's something we did in our AI lab, for example. We did some social media analysis to understand the population sentiment towards a specific topic. It can be restrictions for COVID-19 or maybe a violent outbreak after elections. Then blockchains are used repeatedly as a payment system, an alternative tool for distributing cash-based transfers to improve transparency and make it more efficient. And then something I just had to edit this health epidemics and pandemics. And key technologies here, social media and AI. And for example, what people already are doing is to forecast diseases. For example, it's done for dengue fever, flu, now for COVID-19, using search engine queries, social media, weather data, and geographical data. And we've seen all the tracing and tracking apps for COVID-19. AI is already used for vaccine development to choose optimal patients for trials and for disease evolution monitoring. So a lot of information, I very much understand that. And I want to emphasize again that I could have added so much more and basically find a use case for each technology for each disaster category. So acknowledging that there's so much in production, prototyping and development and just ideas out there, we see the need to very much understand this landscape. So what we're trying to do right now is to scan and categorize it and basically understand how they are connected and how we can connect all the technologies to the use cases and the disasters and hazards. So this is something we're trying to do in our team. So now, after I gave you a little bit more context, and it's also great why we have you here, I would very much like to also understand from you, what are you already working on? And I think you all received your Mentimeter link already. So if you could press the link and maybe vote here so we can more understand what technologies you are already using in your work. And it's just a list of technologies I just presented. We also added other because like no list is complete. And if there's something you don't think we are covering already, then please let us know. And also none if you don't work on anything. And the next question will be, what are you more interested in learning about? And maybe we can look at this one first.
Just to pause quickly, I put the Menti link, but it's menti.com, and the code, I put it in the chat. You can copy it there from there also, but it's 2712090, and you can get to select a list of options. They're a bit bigger on your screen. Apologies that here it's a bit small, but we can read a bit of the results as you respond.
Yes. GIS and social media, it's like this morning. And other already, I'm very much interested to learn what this is about.
Crowdsourcing, communications networks, 5G, cloud
3D
computing.
printing, that's also very interesting. And augmented reality.
Interesting, also the 3D printing, that somebody's using that as well.
Yes, and two others, and I think that's very interesting because I very much want to understand like how our list is not complete in this matter. So hopefully we have time to discuss that later. Cloud computing. And again, it's GIS and social media.
Jonas, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please.
Internet of Things. It just you mean just internet, or there's a concept that I'm not aware of? Sorry.
Well, Internet of Things, the way I understand it, and I think the way it's usually meant is, it's not the concept of internet. It's using the tech, communication networks and the internet to combine physical things. So for example, that we have remote sensing and we get data from that. And then also we have other data sources and we use the internet to combine those things and to basically make all those data sources available and to aggregate them.
I understand better now. Thank you for the clarification.
Of course. Thank you. With three others, I think it's really interesting. Very much want to learn about what you mean about that. I guess it's pretty much complete. Maybe we can move to the next Mentimeter question and save this for this later.
And I think here, if anybody who responded other, if you want to put it in the chat, which other technologies you're also working on, I think that would be great information to know. Yeah, but here we're also interested in learning from you that although you're already using a lot of these technologies, which ones are you still interested in learning more about? So take a moment to respond to this question as well.
Yeah, so either if you just want to learn more about it in general, or also that you already see opportunities in your work and you just want to understand how to use it better. AI, machine learning.
Can I ask you another question, my friend?
Please.
Cyber physical, what was it? Cyber physical
systems.
Could you explain a bit of it? I never heard about that term before. Sorry.
Okay, so it's basically like an end product. I think the best example are autonomous vehicles to use for cyber physical systems. Did you have like a full product that doesn't require any human interaction anymore because the algorithms are already controlling everything. So for example, it measures, let's say, the distance to objects while driving, while measuring the heat outside to cool the car down. And in the end, you don't have a human to define rules anymore to control the mechanism. Everything is controlled by algorithms. So it's kind of like a very advanced end product. And if anyone has a good example of cyber physical systems and the use case for disaster risk management, I'm also really interested to hear about that.
Maybe I can provide an example. Cyber physical systems are mainly a term used in the fourth industrial revolution and Industry 4.0. Basically, for example, in a factory setting, you control all the devices with using IoT and the other technologies in a combined way. And this will allow you to reduce the human intervention in the systems. And for example, if there is let's say a fire or some other disaster, then the systems automatically come into power and start intervening. So basically, cyber physical systems are bringing together the physical objects and the cyber, internet, and all these artificial intelligence and other technologies, and put them into use. You can see early examples, for example, in Amazon warehouses, robots are traveling around. This is a cyber physical system. But if you make it a system, then you can also use it in the disaster contexts. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
For that. Yeah. I see what you mean. Like in seismic early warning and tsunami alerts, perhaps.
Exactly. They can be also integrated in. For example, the gas, electricity, and all the other, let's say, critical items can be stopped in case of a disaster. And this can be part of the broader cyber physical system. Thank you.
Thanks for these examples. I think we have a couple of more colleagues who joined. Welcome. We're just doing a quick round to understand what technologies different colleagues on the call are already using and which there's interest in learning more about. And I think, Jonas, you're very happy about this result that everybody except one person is interested in AI. Yes, and there's also a lot of interest towards blockchain. This morning, we're going to share the recordings from this morning. We had an example from Vanuatu, where they use blockchain for cash transfers. And other very highly rated here is augmented reality, Internet of Things, drones, remote sensing, 3D printing. So quite a variety of things. But without further ado, let's continue, Jonas.
That's a good idea to take the time in consideration. All right, so let me just quickly wrap up what our research will be about then. So we're going to have this one-year research and development being conducted by SDGI Lab, us, and CBI. And the research study basically aims to cover this landscape we were talking about. We want to understand what relevant technologies are out there and how they are used in disaster risk management. We also want to understand what are the main challenges. Maybe is it the data quality? Is it the access to data? Is it the lack of technical knowledge? And then we want to kind of do the same with the networks with you. We want to understand what do you want to use, and we want to use our findings to map it to you to like make it more easy for you to advance in your work as well. And in addition to this, we also want to provide some practical implementations because we have this in-house capacity, and I think it always makes sense to have some hands-on examples how this technology works. So throughout our research, we're going to have more webinars and interviews. So hopefully this is just the first time we're going to talk to each other. We will have the qualitative research, the report of the landscape study and to map it to the networks, and we will have the practical implementations. And of course, in the end, we will have a final webinar series to share all the findings with you again. So this is just the main objectives and key questions again. I think I covered most of them. So maybe just something I want to add here is that we also want to make sure that we have an understanding how to use all those technologies in an inclusive and responsible manner. So for example, we want to answer what are the vulnerable groups to consider when applying technologies for disaster risk management, and also how to make sure that we can trust our results and confidently use them for decision making. I think that's also a very important point. So this is a dimension we very much want to keep in mind while doing this research. Then after we cover the research side, maybe we can talk about the practical implementations, which is the more exciting thing for me, to be honest, because it's going to be back to the coding. And here we want to provide, as I said, the hands-on applicable knowledge for also the networks to build your own capacities. And we want to produce 2 prototypes here. And one is going to be about natural language processing and one about GIS. GIS because it's the key technology. And fortunately, we have Martin in this call who's going to take care of this research stream. And while doing this, we definitely want to consider your needs, the network's needs, to design those prototypes in a way that they can be used for something relevant already. So I think it's time to give it over to Martin, so you can talk us through your GIS research stream a little bit and share it with you. Thank you very much.
Hello, colleagues. Thanks for the nice introduction, and I hope you can all hear me well.
Very well.
And Okay, all right. So I was already seeing that the interest in remote sensing is not very high, but I think it's still very important, and I hope I can show you why. To start things off, I want to fit the terms into the right categories. GIS is a data management system. It gives us a framework for all kinds of spatial data formats, and it provides customized tools to analyze the context of the geospatial data and also extract valuable information. So GIS is a discipline in itself, but it borrows heavily from computer science, and nowadays this influence is growing. We also have other disciplines which are involved in the research, for example, natural sciences, engineering in general, and social sciences is also growing in influence. So I will also give you some examples how these fields of research contribute nowadays into the GIS science. So the framework itself is made out of 3 parts. First of all, we have the data collection side, and most of us know the most common example. Satellites are what everybody thinks about, but in the recent years, more important, we have social media as the source of information, drones and other machines who basically carry some sort of a device to make images or collect sound and have a geolocation as an attribute. So this is the crucial part. We know where it is, and now it's geo information. The next part, which I want to talk about, is the processing side. So extracting information and the construction of models and the generation of new information with it. Processing is also the preparation of raw data and make it accessible for a study later for any kind of context. The displaying part, and this is also a very important part, is basically maps and dashboards and information you want to display. Everybody is familiar with thematic maps, countries, for example. Everybody knows deforestation maps, and it's the core medium to communicate our findings. So we can move on to the next slide. So as we move on, I want to just give a little bit of more detail in some of these points. So to deepen our understanding, we want to see what drives the current development of GIS-based analysis. New technologies driven by digitalization in our societies and industries brings new possibilities in disaster risk research and mitigation. On the data collection side, we see improvements in all relevant dimensions. So what is very important in a catastrophic event, what is important? Time. So we have to be able to access this information very fast, and we have these systems to be ready to get us the necessary information at the correct moment in time. The resolution of the data is important. So if you talk about new camera sensors, the image quality is much better than 20 years ago. The flexibility is another part. The robots, drones, and other machines facilitate the data collection and also reach difficult environments. For example, in disaster context, how to reach in an earthquake situation, how to reach people burrowed under the pieces of the destruction. Crowdsourcing is another important aspect. It enables volunteers to contribute where machines reach a limit. So we cannot solve everything by machines, but we can also use people to contribute. On the processing side, we have huge improvements in hardware and software. So just to give you a good example, artificial neural networks can solve a big variety of problems in the AI learning space. And cloud computing, as Jonas mentioned before, is a very important aspect if you talk about applying these technologies where people don't have the resources for expensive computers and cannot do it by themselves. The end user side is important because if we produce all of these products, we need to deliver them to someone, and people have to be able to access this information, especially in a disaster context. Because if you are in a disaster-struck region, you want to know where did it happen, who's affected, and what can I do. Next one, please. So now just a few examples to illustrate what I'm talking about. There are some classical examples of research, for example, the research of urbanization, poverty and wealth mapping. And since we are in the disaster context, monitoring people at risk, and I can list all of these examples: landslides, earthquakes, disease spreading, which is also very prevalent right now, storm surges, and so on, and also refugee movements. So if you look at these images on the right, on top we see a refugee camp as recorded by a drone. a flying drone. So we can access information about the size of refugee camps and how many people we could estimate to live in this space. If we use, for example, technologies from NLP and extract information from social media and other means, we can see that we can map basically how people move in the space. So in the bottom, we have a map and we see that people, these clusters are refugee camps and cities in the West Africa. And the numbers are the distances between the cities. And we can actually build an agent-based model and predict how refugee movements will happen in the future. So next slide, please. Another very good example is detection of buildings with artificial intelligence. So if you have sufficient data, we can actually map buildings in a given city. And you see these yellow polygons, and the polygons are each like is a building in this image. And if you see at the bottom, there is a disaster happening on the right side. It's a huge flood, and on the left side is the city, how it was before. And we can actually estimate the amount of buildings destroyed with this technology very quickly. So we know, okay, we have like 100 houses are destroyed, and this is where we have to go and assess the damage quickly. So we can move on to the last slide. To facilitate this technology or enable it. So let's say GIS is a core technology. Jonas already mentioned that. And it utilizes cutting-edge machine learning algorithms for deep analysis of better prediction models. Systems, GIS is a system for rapid emergency response as well. So we can build systems to achieve this goal. Key considerations we have to do it requires some technical specialists, of course, and high quality data, but we are reaching this goal much closer nowadays than 20 years ago. Data availability is important, and computational power is also of great importance. So I think this wraps it up for me, and I would like to give it back to Jonas. Thank you very much.
Martin, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are very short on time again, so give me 2 minutes to also talk about NLP, which is my personal passion. And it's also a very exciting research stream, in my opinion, even though it's not as many fancy maps as GIS can produce. So NLP basically describes a subfield of many things: linguistics, computer science, AI, and is concerned with the interaction between computer and human language. So everything concerned to text data is basically related to NLP. Google search queries, text messages, news items, social media posts, forums, and documents, all of those things. We have to keep in mind that 70 to 80% of all data is text data, and this is increasing. So this is just going to be more. And text can preserve very complex and critical information. That's why it's so exciting for me to work on text data. So I just want to give you some examples how I'm working with NLP right now in a development context, not necessarily related to disaster risk management, but we're getting there. And for example, I'm doing a lot of information extraction. I use NLP to process documents and text sources and to extract information from them automatically. I use a lot of text classification, which is very much rooted in machine learning and deep learning. So for example, we're trying to map project documents and national development plans to sustainable development goals to more understand what people are working on in this field. Then we can use it for summarizing long documents to just like gather information more quickly, more efficiently. And then my personal passion, again, it's basically the building chatbots. And those are already used for emergency communication. We've seen it during COVID-19 that we were able to talk to those chatbots in our phones and just asking questions about the disease. And we get accurate answers because it's monitored, so it can be really helpful. And then, of course, language and machine translation is a very important factor, especially encompassing all those member states that the UN have. All right, let me give you just very few examples how NLP is used in disaster risk management. So one thing I find interesting is to use tweets to predict, to detect sub-events. So we can see, for example, that a main flood is happening or is coming. But we can use posts on social media to also detect the sub-events. We can see, okay, maybe this specific road is blocked or this bridge collapsed, and we can extract this information and basically act upon. Then maybe the most interesting use case for me was used after the Paris terror attacks in Paris, and it's about gather actionable information. So what people did, they were looking at this hashtag Porto-Verde, and they were building algorithms that were understanding if this is just a moral support or people were really offering shelter. And this is really actionable information, and it's very important to have that. So I think this is a really, really interesting use case. And just in general, and this is also something you will see when you're going to work about NLP or going to learn more about that, the underlying team and the main impact that NLP can have in disaster risk management is definitely information extraction from semi-structured text sources, because it just saves so much time. Instead of Googling something or instead of reading through documents, automating the extraction of information and then aggregate it to get an overall picture is just very, very useful. And also, of course, machine translation, to just like bring tools to people that don't speak English as well. I'm very happy to share more information about that, but I guess it's about time to give over to the networks and to get some feedback from you guys as well. So thank you very much, and over to you, Tina, again.
Thank you so much, Jonas and Martin and Gökhan. So now, without further ado, since we're running a bit short of time, I'm going to hand over to the colleagues in Mexico to talk about the digital platform for coordination. So over to Luis and Juan Pablo and Edgar.
Yes, good morning to you all. I'll ask Juan Pablo to present, Juan Pablo and Edgar to present the IT platform that we are developing. Just let me say a couple of words that it's important that what we're doing here in Mexico. Essentially, on a personal note, I am working with a computer vision, artificial vision company, and we are in the midst of developing, I think we have gotten a very significant breakthrough on a non-invasive glucometer that it's able to identify your sugar level with light, with transmittance of light. So you do not have to draw a sample of blood anymore. And essentially, that is very useful because in a matter of seconds, you can be connected on a digital signal and send that information over to your treating physician. So essentially, doing this on a prevention basis, on campaigns to reduce diabetes has become a really interesting focus. And we're now working with the Social Security Institute in Mexico in order to validate the development. We're also working on a nano-optics platform to identify or to detect infectious diseases. So essentially, we saw that, let's say, a mosquito can carry dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, and if you're bitten by the mosquito, it can inoculate that virus. And the idea is to identify whether you have that virus on site. It can be done in a clinical office. So essentially, draws you take a sample of your own serum and put it in a vial with a colloidal gel and also antibodies, and then with certain spectrum light, you're able to capture the identification of whether the reaction is present, and essentially you can detect dengue going forward. So that's another very interesting development that we're using. And as well, we are in the process of identifying cancer through mammograms and also skin cancer on moles and specks that you may have on the hand. So that is using deep learning models, neural networks as well, and as well is high advanced processing. I also would like to tell you what we're doing in Senaced. We have put together a telemedicine initiative. So essentially that initiative allows, we have a call center, and then we have psychologists and physicians that are volunteers. So we connect those psychologists to people that are in need of psychological support during these pandemics. So essentially, they can connect and they can support them and try to lower the levels of anxiety. So essentially, this is working out very well. We have provided this network, this platform to the government. We wanted this platform to identify potential symptoms of COVID. However, the government has been very, very reluctant in allowing us to deploy this platform because they are the only ones that are trying to manage all of the information coming out of the pandemics. No? So we are restricted to doing this for psychological purposes. So essentially, this platform has been a very interesting resource for people who are, driven to a level where they can even commit suicide, or sometimes they are very anxious, or they can become violent. So this is a very interesting tool that Senacet has developed. I would ask Juan Pablo and Edgar to give you an idea of the IT platform that we are developing with the help of CBI. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. I don't know, Tina, Luis, shall we present the document that we produced, or shall we just go like this, like just sharing? Can I share my screen, or what would you?
Yeah, if you want, if you have slides, you can just share your screen and show from there. And also for the other participants, the Mexico colleagues, the broader group has developed this nice video which summarizes the coordination platform really nicely. So we're going to share the link to the video after this meeting. But if you could just walk through the slides in a couple of minutes. So that's then we also have a little bit of time for the Turkey colleagues to present.
Sure, no worries. Could
Thank you.
allow me to share my screen?
I'm gonna stop sharing then, maybe.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, so I will go forward with this presentation. Let me know if you see it, please.
Yes, we can see it.
You can see it. All right. Okay. So basically, with Edgar Gonzalez, with my colleague from UNDP, we're going to share our experience in Mexico, creating this Connecting Business initiative, and how the new technology is helping us to overcome the challenges that we have facing, and are facing, and we will face in Mexico. Since this is our just overall figures, just to let you know where we are in terms of the impact in Mexico. More than 1 million people infected. We are ranked 4, sadly, in terms of death toll. United States is the first, India, Brazil, and then Mexico. So, but beyond the impact on humans in terms of lives, the GDP in Mexico is forecasted to lose 9%, which is massive for an economy as a country as big as Mexico. And so just to frame the context of what we are facing in one of the most affected countries in the world. The important thing of this slide is to tell you that the response in Mexico is based on our national security mechanism. Government is not responding as in other disasters, as natural disasters or other kind of disasters. The coordination is restricted to military, to official entities. So NGOs, other actors have a challenge to meet and dialogue on the needs and potential activities. So that's why Connecting Business is a solution for us, since we live in a 30th largest economy in the world, and the businesses in Mexico are pretty massive, robust, and they have much experience working in disaster relief and management. So this framework, supported by OCHA and UNDP globally, has founded in Mexico a champion, in fact, for the region, and one of the most sound and robust practices. Senacet, Luis is the CBI lead for this platform of businesses in Mexico, which is pretty large. Banks, airliners, business of different kind that are the network of networks that works on disaster risk management, of course, and works a lot with the pandemic, as Luis just mentioned. But not only Senacet is leading, of course, this platform, but it comprises as well UN agencies. Mexico has one of the largest UN presences in the world, more than 25 funds, programs, and agencies, all work in different aspects of development, of humanitarian work. But just to tell you that, all working to overcome the challenges of the pandemic. And we are bridging between all these UN agencies and private sector, thanks to Senacet lead. And we have as well a humanitarian network. Pretty robust as well. Mexico, because of geographically speaking, is in the path to the United States. Migration issues, Refugee issues are quite important in Mexico, but we are a country exposed to natural disasters, earthquakes, in the path of hurricanes, etc., and of course, man-made. So we have big NGOs that have Mexico's coverage, but as well in Central America and the Caribbean, but big players, Child Fund, World Vision, Save the Children, International Committee of the Red Cross, which is not an NGO, but is part as well of the network. In fact, all this is working together to work on the COVID response. So initially, we have identified 4 sectors to work to start with. One is health, facilitated by WHO, PAHO, the World Health Organization. WASH, of course, facilitated by UNICEF, FAO, leading, facilitating food security, and of course, early recovery, very important, which is facilitated by our colleagues from UNDP. And here we pass the word to our colleague Edgar, who works for UNDP, to carry on with the presentation. Would you, Edgar?
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Nice to meet you, colleagues. My name is Edgar Gonzalez. I'm working at UNDP country office in Mexico. I know we are running out of time, so we are going to be very, very fast in this part. The details on the development of this platform, you will see it in the video that we will share with you. Basically, we would like to provide a brief comment on the process that we're supporting for the development of the platform, and a dialogue tables of different topics, as Juan Pablo mentioned, specifically for the early recovery and the promotional resilient livelihoods. UNDP is facilitating the coordination and synergies around other private sectors and NGO networks that are already implementing or that are interested in support some economic measures and programs to stop or restore the livelihoods and economic activity of the most vulnerable people affected by the COVID contingencies. So basically, we're supporting 2 processes. On one side, the process of dialogue and coordination between networks and different actors in the country, including the public sector, but also just to promote these synergies and common understanding and improve the impact of the support provided by these networks. And on the other side is the development of this platform. It's a digital platform that will facilitate the exchange of information, the coordination between the users to provide guidelines and be like a recipe of best practices and so on that will facilitate the coordination among the private sector and NGOs to improve the impact in the country. The development of this platform is already in place. We expect that it will be functional soon. And through this platform, the entities will be able to join not only the first one, but new actors will also participate eventually. And well, I just want to add that this platform will have a continuous growing by adding more information and services to other phases. And in this sense, as any coordination tool, it will be improved once it starts working and will adapt to the needs and opportunities that we identify during its use. So I think that we are already past our time, so I let it here. Please see the video. You can have a little bit more information about this effort.
Thank you, Edgar. So yeah, we will end saying that of course this tool, a virtual tool, is helping us to do what we cannot do in this COVID-19 pandemic, which is meet, exchange information, identify needs, exchange, and this could be implemented in other contexts, high middle income countries, other countries within the LAC region or beyond. So thank you very much for listening, and we are very pleased to continue sharing and learning from you. And Godspeed to all in these crazy times. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, colleagues. Very interesting example, and we'll share the link to the video. Without further ado, going over to Erhan to talk about the new technologies used in Turkey.
Great. So thank you again for giving me the word, and a great pleasure to meet with you all. Just for other stakeholders who doesn't know what TurkConfed does is I'd like to give 2 minutes of introduction and see how we are tackling the problems at hand. So we are a business confederation representing 40,000 businesses in Turkey, and we do policy development, we do lobbying, and we create capacity development projects for our members, and we provide them networking opportunities. And our focuses are digitalization, finance, good governance, macroeconomics. I think in a sense, it's similar to what our stakeholders are doing, but it's also a little bit different because it is business oriented. So disasters and resilience, disaster reliefs are topics that we delved into 2 years ago. And my colleague Betul is leading the charge there, and we are trying to tackle the problems of digitalization, disaster relief, and recently COVID-19, as you all know. So for that end, how are we tackling the situation? First, we did a situation analysis. We did surveys in March and May. Twice to see how COVID is impacting businesses. And as you may know, it's affecting pretty badly. So in our 620 samples, only 17% said that we have not been impacted at all. And in May, this dropped to 11%. So most of the businesses in Turkey are impacted very badly. And in May, 54% of all the subjects said that our revenues are declined by at least half. So this is a major number, and we also had the chance to analyze it for women entrepreneurs, and in fact Syrian businesses, which are impacted even worse. So the scale of impact is not homogeneous at all. For instance, for Turkish businesses, only 22% stopped their operations fully, but for Syrian businesses, it's 38%. So in Turkey, when we think of disaster, we firstly think of securing supply chain, restarting sectors, physical assessment of production facilities and infrastructure. And to that end, we are tackling this issue in two folds. One is that we prepared a report for our member associations and federations and guide them on what to do after a disaster happens. And in the second fold, we are trying to assist companies, and we are trying to prepare them for disasters, not just what happens after a disaster happened, but also beforehand. So we prepared a program for companies to create their disaster preparedness plan, as well as coach them briefly to prepare them what's ahead. And when we are doing those, we are focusing on technologies such as communication networks, social media, and cloud computing. I know that these are very conventional, but for instance, when the earthquake happened in Izmir last month, we see more and more technologies that are being used, such as geographical information systems or crowdsourcing, which are done by public stakeholders, which is very rare in Turkey. And in terms of disaster risk management, we use actionable information gathering, the damage and loss assessment, disaster preparedness, disaster relief logistics, and resource allocation. We provide resources to companies directly who were affected by this earthquake or the pandemic in a larger sense. And we have some examples from the field that we saw happen after the earthquake. And people were very affectionate towards the people who were affected by this earthquake. And there were huge donations, but they were done through public stakeholders and through crowdsourcing, basically. So in terms of one project, there were 16 million Turkish lira of support in just rent, and 226 people shared their houses. 4,477 people supported the cause in 16 million Turkish liras, and some of those models are combined. So this specific example combines GIS usage and the crowdsourcing. So on the map, there's a map of use, which my colleague will share a resource of in the chat section. You can see a map where you can see health centers, housing options, psychological support centers, but it is also done through crowdsourcing. So these are my notes. So I try to keep it brief, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer to all of them. And the same note, Godspeed to everyone else.
Thank you. I know we're 3 minutes over time, so thanks everybody for taking the time. And if you have a few more minutes, if you have any questions, we could take a couple of the questions. And of course, we are also happy to continue bilaterally, and we will organize another webinar early next year. So feel free to open your mic and ask your questions if you have any.
Hi, it's a question to Jonas and also Martin.
Please.
What is your associations? Where do you work, and whether you can support some of these technology-driven applications?
So, if I understand you right, my association is I work for UNDP, and SDG iLab is basically something we built within UNDP. Is that what you were asking for?
So we have this new partnership with the SDG AI Lab, which is also hosted by UNDP. So we are tapping into the technical expertise of this unit to help also CBI. And we're going to send the slides to you, which also describe we're going to do a research together with Jonas and Martin and Gökhan and their team members during the next year on different types of potential applications of new technologies for disaster management. And in this process, we would be also very much interested in speaking with different networks, sort of how do you see the potential in your context? And hopefully we could come up with some potential pilot initiatives that we can support going forward. So that is what we are planning. And we're great to see that you're interested in this topic, and we can continue the discussions also how we could develop something jointly together.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Tina. There was a...
maybe I can add one dimension. If UNDP Mexico would like to engage with SDG AI Lab, maybe we can also provide some volunteer data scientist support to the projects that the colleague participating from Mexico. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. If there are no further questions, you can also reach out to us later. Jonas, if you just quickly put the last slide, I'm going to just recap the next steps. So So basically, we are doing these consultations with different partners and experts on the research outline. I also shared the research outline in the meeting invite. So if you have any comments and suggestions on that one, we would also very much welcome your input. We also, the written landscape study, we will provide a draft version for you early next year. Currently, the SDG AI Lab colleagues are onboarding data scientists for technology scoping, and we're also developing our thoughts, concretizing our thoughts on the technology scoping on the AI and also on the GIS work stream. And we will have the next webinar early next year, as mentioned. And just one note also, talking specifically on GIS technology, we are also developing online courses with PDRF team on that. So those will be available to all of you. And we had an interesting presentation by PDRF colleagues, the Emergency Operations Center this morning also, that we will share the slides with you where they explain how they use GIS and what benefits they provide to their members. So this is really a collaborative initiative between us and the SDG AI Lab colleagues and also PDRF and the other networks. So we're very much looking forward to working on this with all of you or everybody who is interested in this. And yeah, thanks so much for making time for this, and we look forward to continuing this discussion, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody who's observing that. So thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Thank
Nice
you.
beard,
Bye-bye.
Luis.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank Karen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Luis, if you like, you